Welcome back to the Cinema Condition with your host, filmmaker, and creator of the Nerdcore Podcast Network, Raul Alejandro Mendoza. And today we are back again with another movie and another guest on our season finale. Yes, that is true. We have reached our season finale of this wonderful season of the Cinema Condition, and we are going to be discussing 1988's controversial film, which doesn't really deserve the controversy it has. It was just we're going to talk about that, and that is The Last Temptation of Christ from critically acclaimed director and what has been, called the greatest living director we have right now, Martin Scorsese. And of course, to join me today, we are back again, not in the physical presence because we can't be here together, but I still have fond memories of our recording of Tangerine. That is none other than my friend, incredible cinephile, AK. How you doing, brother?
Hey, what's up? What's up? This is impressive. Like the Discord chat and everything, the way you set it up, it was really quick how we got in and did it. So I genuinely appreciate it. I have a lot to learn from you, Raul, as a partner in the audio world,
in the creative space.
Yeah, I have a lot to learn from you, man.
Yeah, I just recently fixed the whole layout. I added emojis and stuff to make everything look a little bit more pretty, a little more organized, and
this shit looks dope.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks. It's something that I've had to learn, kind of doing all this. I was like, okay, let's learn how to kind of just work this all out and make this more organized, because I want this to be a place where it looks nice. It doesn't look like it's unorganized. So I want to say that I've done a pretty good job at this.
Yeah, I agree. I've been stuck in a creative rut a little bit about like how to restructure my podcast for the pandemic and stuff like that. And for the most part, because I don't have like a regular rotating cast, it's looking like it's going to be a solo endeavor whenever it does come back, whenever I do come back to creative work. So we'll see how that goes. But there are some plans, but I don't see it being as well organized as this. It's going to be a mess for a minute for me.
Yeah, man. I mean, you talk about creative ruts. I haven't written a script since the pandemic hit. So,
weird.
Creatively, I'm in a rut myself, but at least I'm able to do this. And it's, I cannot believe we reached the last episode of this season. I think that, first of all,
proud of you.
I'm really excited for next season because we get to do The Wind Will Carry Us. And that's
amazing.
Yeah, like you and I will be able to do that. And I was like, oh, man, I'm so looking forward to this. And, because I really do want to speak more on Basquiat Ostrami because, he's a filmmaker I don't know that well. But, I've always heard the name. I just haven't had the time to really research him. All of that changes next month on our International Film Month, though, because I did choose Close Up. But
that's amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
I tried to show Close Up at the club. I don't think I had prepared people for what that type of screening would be, right? Like it is. Excuse me, I'm getting some notifications. And
do not worry about that. Yeah, so I'm really glad that you're able to come back. And I think that, first of all, we made it 30 episodes already. We're done with this. And originally, you all didn't know this, but, AK wasn't supposed to be the season finale. It was supposed to be 2001: A Space Odyssey with Patrick, but I loved our episode of Tangerine so much, and I said, I gotta have AK on as the last.
Also, the promise of, the movie we're about to discuss.
Yes.
The last station. Yeah, they're just the titillating idea of talking about Willem Dafoe. I do have a swerve for you whenever we get into, because there's another actor in this movie that I forgot how wonderful he is in it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I also did not know that, so I met Alan Rosenberg at our college, and he plays Thomas in this film. And I didn't notice that until I had I had looked at my Wikipedia. I was just like, oh man, I love The Last Temptation. I get these moments where I just randomly look at Wikipedia pages of the movies I really like.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and I was like, oh wait, and I read Alan Rosenberg. I was like, wait, who is Alan Rosenberg? Thomas. I was like, holy crap, this man's in my favorite Scorsese film, and I just left class.
This movie, by the way, is wild. Like like the billing is like, I mean, David Bowie's in this movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's wild. Like some of the stuff they incorporated in this movie are super like weird. I mean, it looks a little dated now, I guess.
Yeah.
But for '88, like a lot of the stuff they were doing was very unique.
Yeah.
For that era.
And I also want to say, compared to Passion of the Christ, there's a whole lot of more black people in this film that there is in the Passion of the Christ. I'll tell you that.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I do want to. There is a part of me, like in my head, like there are 3 points that I want to bring up, and one of them is like the good parts and the bad parts of what Martin Scorsese captured about Israel and the Middle East and Jerusalem and stuff like that. And that's one of the more positive aspects, is that it showed the different like skin colors of people that were available not only in that time period but still exists in the Middle East, right? I mean, where I used to live in the Middle East, Nazareth and like Jerusalem were like less than pretty much like a 3-hour plane ride, like less than a 3-hour plane ride. Like we were right there. So like that, I'm very familiar with that region to a certain extent. And yeah, but there were some weird aspects to the way that like people envision how the Middle East work at those time periods. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm like looking forward to talk about. I know that our main dish is the performance.
Of course.
A lot of the performances.
Yes, of course. But before we have to get to that, of course, we'll talk more about, the end of the season at the end of the show. I'll talk about, how much fun I've had here. But that'll be saved for the end of the show. I just really want to get into this movie already. But
all right, let's get it.
But we cannot get into it until we do introduce, because we've never talked about Scorsese on this podcast before. I have to introduce you all to the filmmaker known as Martin Charles Scorsese. He was born in November 17th, 1942. Yeah, he is 77 years old. And he's an Italian American director. He went to school for his bachelor's and master's. He went to NYU, and he has been directing films since '63. A very, very prominently important figure when we entered the new stage of Hollywood here in the United States. Scorsese was a big part of where Hollywood would go. He's made a lot of the movies that have been pretty much considered some of the most important films in the U.S. You've got Goodfellas, you've got Wolf of Wall Street. You have all these incredible films that he's directed, but he also has never strayed from the path of creating, films. It's like he always kind of gets told as like, oh, he's the mob movie director, but there's more to Scorsese than that. He has his very, intimate faith-based films like this film, but also Silence that came out in 2016. He also has his documentaries he's made, like, he did that Bob Dylan documentary. He's also done Italian American, which was a short film on his parents. He also made The King of Comedy, After Hours, but he's majorly known for his big films like Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Casino, Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed. All these. His history in filmmaking. He really goes really, really far depth. I mean, he's been steadily making a lot of incredible films, and of course, he did create 2019's The Irishman for Netflix, which was 3 hours and 30 minutes long. And he will be returning in 2021 with his next film, Killers of the Flower Moon, which once again, it looks to be another film that's not based around the mafia or anything. So it's kind of him going, kind of experimenting past that, because Irishman was a mob movie. But yes, Scorsese, like multiple Academy Award nominated director. He won his Best Director with Departed, which was more of his legacy win, because he should have won that for a couple of his movies before. And yeah, Scorsese looks at very, very interesting topics, of course, the life of crime, but he also looks at some very intimate presentations of relationships, faith, and at times love as well. So I want to go ahead and get into this. The Last Temptation of Christ. I don't think we can even start this film without even talking about the controversy around this movie. And really the smear campaign that was done by the Catholic Church about this film. But I do want to preface this and say, if you are listening to this because you want to hear our opinions or on this film because you think it depicts the story of Christ, I want to tell you that you are completely wrong, because this is not based on the Gospels. This is based on the fictional book, The Last Temptation of Christ, by Nico Kazantzakis, and which came out in the 50s, that is more about the spiritual conflict of Christ. It pretty much kind of does go through the whole story of the Gospels, but it takes its liberties towards the end of the book, and really it's more so an introspective dive within the character of Jesus and, the relationship between man and deity. So, this film, it's not a Passion of the Christ. It's not a Gospel according to St. Matthew. This is very much a introspective work from Scorsese that was written by, of course, Paul Schrader, with some uncredited rewrites by Scorsese and Jay Cox. But, of course, the film stars Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe playing Jesus of Nazareth. Harvey Keitel playing Judas, or I like to call him Bronx Judas, because he never got rid of that damn New York accent in there.
Chef's kiss.
Love it. I love it.
William Dafoe is in any scene. I have to just say this real quick. Any scene Harvey Keitel's with William Dafoe, as much as he is in character, can't help but like when having an interaction with Harvey Keitel to just break out that fucking New York accent.
Yeah.
Bad. It's so good. Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
Barbara Hershey plays Mary Magdalene, and then we have Andre Gregory, Harry Dean Stanton, and David Bowie, who in this film. And of course, the film was all completely shot entirely in Morocco. But I want to go into this, man, and I want to talk about the whole controversy of this film.
Let's get it.
Yeah, so before this even was scheduled to come out, this movie was already having a big smear campaign by the Catholic Church because, yes.
Can I read you a quote that I really like?
Yes, of course.
From some sort of Catholic, I think it's a lady. She's a Catholic nun.
Mm-hmm.
She said of The Last Temptation, the most blasphemous ridicule of the Euphrates that has ever been perpetrated in this world. And it is a Holocaust movie that has the power to destroy souls eternally. That is some hate. That is some hate.
Dude, it's wild because you look at the things that were, so like it's because I think the thing that they have the most problem with is because towards the end of the film, Jesus has sex. And it's like,
that's one of the bigger ones.
One of the bigger ones. This Jesus isn't, Jesus in this film, he's seen as in moments of sadness, depression, fear, confusion,
uncertainty. Yeah, there's a lot of those emotions that play out early in the movie, and then there's this moment where there's like this reconciliation of thinking like, oh, he's figured it out. But all the way up until the end, he is confounded, confused, taken aback, wanting to run away. He's very much like a very helpless child in all of the movie. And I don't think a lot of Christians like the idea of thinking of Jesus, this prophetic figure, to be like vulnerable in any way, I guess.
And this set, and of course, a big controversial take on it. And it was mostly at the hands of the Catholic Church for making a lot of this happen.
I mean, even before the movie came out, I mean, the book itself, which was released like
in the 50s,
a couple of decades before the multiple decades before. It's a 1955 novel. That novel was already like controversial. So I think just Martin feeling the idea to like adapt that started like this wave of people now wanting it to be shown in theaters and stuff like that. So I think like I think no one who would have attacked this movie. This is one of the weird ones. I usually do give the benefit of a doubt of thinking like, oh well, there could be some legitimate criticisms. But I do think that because of how controversial the original book was, like you could make the argument that a lot of these people that were upset about this movie never gave it the opportunity to present its own thesis as a film on its own.
100%. And I think that, so first of all, I mean, there was a lot of things going on here. So there was a terrorist attack in October 22nd, 1988 in a cinema in Paris. And then there, of course, Scorsese, received multiple death threats because of the film. And of course, there were protests going on about the film as well. And there was, of course, censorship going on with this film as well. It was, it was banned, dude. The Netflix, and it was released in Singapore in Netflix in 2020, in February 2020, and it revealed that it had to be removed from there. Yeah, it had to be removed, and this stuff is still going on in 2020, man. It's crazy, but
I mean, people even talk about how Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie, was trying to be very authentic to the canon of the Catholic Church, but that one got a lot of that one blew up really badly because of like some of the insinuations it had made about Jesus's relationship with Mary of Magdalene and stuff like that. Yeah. So like even when you try to make an authentic, it seems as if like people's interpretations of Jesus and Christ and their Christian faith, or any faith in particular, is an extremely individual thing, right? So, and it's so like integral to a lot of people's identity, right? That seeing something that doesn't match up with your understanding becomes like an insult to the foundation of like how you believe in God and the world, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's when I don't think you could make a movie about a religious figure. I mean, in the Middle East, we have something that was similar. I'm sorry. If you want to continue.
No. You go ahead. Go ahead. Bring it up.
Yeah, there's in the Middle East. We had a very famous Jordanian director. He is incredible, and he wanted to tell the story of how the message of God got brought down to Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. And he made the movie in two versions. He made an Arabic version with an entirely Arabic cast, and then he made an English version. Islam is different than Christianity because Islam doesn't believe in showing the prophet. Giving anyone the ability to act as a prophet is blasphemous for a lot of people. So it's not really like agreed upon theologically. Some theologians think that it's fine to depict the prophet. You have to, so we could describe him and know what he looks like. But it's just such a big deal that when directors make stories about prophets and stuff like that, even whether it's Jesus, Moses, any of them, not just Muhammad, there isn't an actor that depicts them. So he did a really interesting thing. The entire movie, most of the movie, is filmed in first person from the perspective of Muhammad, the prophet. And the characters are basically speaking to the audience to speak to Muhammad.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting thing because you don't get to show the prophet, and in the same essence, you are showing the devotion that a lot of the disciples of this religious figure had, the respect, the camera would swift in which they would like lower their heads or whatever and respect and stuff like that. So you got to see it on a really personal level. It fucking blew up. Eventually, they ended up assassinating the director in Mecca. In Mecca, they had a terrorist attack in which they assassinated the movie's called The Message. It's a wonderful movie. It reminds me a lot of the controversy around The Last Temptation of Christ and the movie in general, because it tells the life story of Muhammad until his death.
I definitely need to watch it. I definitely
It's
do
a
need to watch
fantastic
it.
movie. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
There's an English version with like Laurence of Olivier in it and stuff like that.
mhm.
Like it's a crazy cast. So like
Yeah.
I think you don't need to like find subtitles for an Arabic movie because they were filmed together.
Yeah.
So like
That's still
and
wild. That's still
yeah,
wild. He was able to get funding for two different versions
yeah.
of the same movie.
Yeah, they were filmed on the same set.
That's crazy.
At certain points even they would need to film entire scenes together because they wouldn't have time.
Yeah.
So one half of the set would be for the Arabic cast and the other would be for
That's
the American
wild.
cast.
That's
They also have to
wild.
make artistic decisions depending on which regions the film was going to be released on. But yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Oh, that's
Omar Sharif is in the movie. Like there's a lot of like a lot of cool shit in that movie.
yeah, that's
Um,
crazy, dude. I
yeah.
That's so baller though that you get to make two versions of the same movie.
I know. For a while there, Middle Eastern directors, we were talking about Karstoumi, like Middle Eastern directors were doing some crazy shit,
Yeah.
like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like they were on some crazy shit. And then
Yeah.
like they burned the whole region down. And so a lot of people had to tone it down or do their
Yeah.
movies elsewhere. But yeah, back when artistic like license was available, people were doing some cool shit there. But yeah, this movie for me has a lot of facsimiles with it. And I feel like that controversy always stems from this idea that like you're desecrating my idea of my religion. And so it's weird because a lot of religions, like there's this preaching of religious freedom
Yeah.
and they don't allow others to have their own interpretations of what it is.
And I'll tell you, AK,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not expressing my religious views here. It's, you know, my religious views are my religious views, even if there's an absence of them. And honestly, I will say I watched films like, you know, The Passion of the Christ, and those films, and more than anything, made me feel more guilty than somehow relating to the central character of Jesus. This is the one and only film I watched where I truly felt like I understood and connected to Jesus. This is those moments when he is crying, when he is trying to understand why, this eternal being would choose him, this person who he feels like he is not worthy and not able to be the person he can be for God. All those moments were just something for me where I was like finally I found something that makes me feel like I'm connected to this man, because for so long these faith-based films have always been centrally portraying the deity. They never ever just talk about the man that is him.
Yeah, and like this movie, like I believe genuinely that this movie's central thesis is that Jesus, it's this eternal struggle. I mean, it's the first quote in the movie. It is the central thesis of this movie. It is this conflict between the human and the superhuman inside. This idea of Jesus versus the battle of the flesh, right? Like this very specific idea of like Jesus was born into a world of men. He sees all of the things that tempt and contempt man, and some of them are not all bad. Some of them bring you personal joy, selfish comforts in life, right? And not all of them are terrible. But there's also that conflict with Jesus of salvation, right? Of doing something not for oneself, but for everyone else. And how far are you willing to take that responsibility of sacrificing yourself or giving yourself up or attacking something that could bring you personal harm for the sake of everyone, that brings you almost no joy to a certain extent, right? And I think that's one of the parts that are really interesting in this movie. You could disagree with me here, but I never felt like William Dafoe's Jesus ever felt like he was happy in his work towards salvation.
No, of course, I agree with you.
Yeah, it was an ordeal, the entire movie. And I feel like maybe for a lot of modern people, for a lot of people that live in modern day, there's comfort to the idea of Jesus and what he did for them. He is a saint after all. There's like really warm connotations to a lot of this Christ saying. There's warm, like huggable uh, sensations that you get out of that. Like it just envelops you in comfort. And you don't want to see a man who did this thing that has like given you so much comfort and I don't know what the word is, like warmth inside of yourself, faith inside of yourself, to have been not just struggling, but actively to a certain extent despising the task at hand and afraid of it.
Yeah.
And very self-conscious, like not self-conscious, self-protective. Like he just wants to, at every given moment he's having to struggle with his fight or flight and just running away from everything.
Yeah. And every time I kind of recommend this film, and I'm like, I always kind of tell people, like, if you want to see something different, from these faith-based films, like, because like I said, I have my thoughts on The Passion of the Christ. Like, I think that movie is like, pretty much torture porn. Honestly, it's pretty bad. Like the way that it just presents all that stuff, and
Yeah.
and I think it's a low key kind of anti-Semitic in a way, and
Yeah.
and
it's more consistent.
yeah, and I tell people about what the film is, and how it's not, it's not an adaptation of the Gospels. It's not giving you the perspective of the book. It's more so of an introspective eternal struggle in here. And they always give me the I don't think I can watch that then. But it's, and I don't know if it's because it comes from a place of not wanting, not saying that to challenge faith, but having to see faith from a different perspective, and I say that from a person who who constantly has to struggle with their faith.
Yeah, I completely understand that, right? Like I'm a very huge proponent of like religious identity, right? People who like put themselves into their faith and stuff like that. I'm not a religious person. I don't have a lot of faith. I don't much struggle with it, but I understand people who do, because it is a powerful sensation. There is this power to it, and there is this philosophy to it. And so it's always interesting because I've always been taught the religious expression is about not just learning, right, but about understanding why the things that they are, or how the faith-based like religious mandates that we have exist the way they are, like at their core, besides what the rule is. Why was the rule made? And from there you can understand that like the spiritual and blah blah blah, and we don't need to get into all that philosophical stuff, but a lot of that stuff. But I feel like a lot of people generally enjoy comfort in knowing that there is a house that is built for them, right? They don't want to lay the bricks. They're like, the bricks have been laid. I need to show up to the house and I'll feel comfortable in that house. Instead of thinking of it as like a really long road where every other generation is adding more to this road to connect it to other roads, to make it more easier for people to access, for stuff like that. People think of it as a monument. It was built, it's done, it needs to stay. But really, I think, I don't know if Martin agrees with this, because Martin at the end, we'll get to the plot of the movie. But I do think that Martin does believe in the canonization of the religion, right? And what it meant, right? And a lot of it. But he internalizes it in a different way, right? And that's just as important as laying the bricks for the road, or laying the asphalt for the road, or adding to the monument that you have of your religion. To look at it from different angles is just as important as like actively working to make your religion better or not. So that's kind of a beautiful thing about like people who have to reconcile with their faith and their religion, is that, I mean, at the end of the day, Martin Scorsese got to tell his own interpretation of what makes him a Christian, right? Like this movie, nothing about this movie tells me that Martin Scorsese is not a Christian. All this movie tells me is, holy shit, if I knew Martin Scorsese for his like mafia movies and like a couple like Wolf of Wall Street or whatever, right? I would have never thought that person is a Christian, watching this movie, the only thing I can take away from it is fucking Martin Scorsese is an avowed fucking Christian.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's what kind of makes this film so genuine, that it is truly a thesis. It feels like as if it truly feels like a passion project, because you hear all these directors always talk about, like, oh, this is my passion project. The film never really feels like a passion project. But this 100% throughout the whole film, it feels like something that Martin has always been kind of striving to make, has always felt like a struggle to have to make it, because he put this off. He was gonna make this earlier, but then he decided to do After Hours, and then he does this, and it feels like it's something that he has always felt as not just an artist, but as a Christian, that he felt that he had a need to kind of do this and really create this film that truly depicts something that we're not used to seeing on the screen when it comes to faith-based films.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's absolutely accurate. I mean, that to me, that's why I hate this controversy for this movie, right? Yeah. Because we could talk about what the movie is, right? Like I have quite a few gripes with this movie specifically. I understand why its critical appeal has not aged well to a certain extent. It's not one of those movies that are considered classic. It got a lot of critical favor when it originally came out, but over time it has not established anything new or whatever, to have a very meaty conversation about what that movie is. But I hate that the controversy was about this extremely avowed Christian person who has taken really careful care of what the movie they want to do and the history that's behind it, right? Is somehow a blasphemous anti-Christian hedonist who is sullying our religion. No, this is a powerful ally you have in this. And this is why I genuinely hate this fucking controversy, because it is genuinely ridiculous. And it is absolutely emblematic of how the entrenched Catholic view of things has been so problematic for Christians for such a long time, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into I don't know if it's appropriate. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Catholic, so I don't know if it's appropriate for me to talk about that. But I do feel like there's this entrenched, suffocating a little bit of what the message is.
And my friend, you don't have to feel bad about having to bring it up, because you've seen it. We've seen it all the time. I mean, us as film students, we've studied it. What's it called? The Catholic Church was literally in hand in censoring so many films and making sure that a lot of the art that we wanted to watch that was not at that in the 60s and the 70s, there was they were censoring so much work and making sure that work art that could not challenge the church was not being created. And I think and ultimately this is my opinion, and I think that and I agree with you, it comes from this suffocating idea of not wanting to evaluate what faith is, and being afraid of presenting these different points of views and what that could do for other people, and not allowing for people to kind of think about faith as a personal thing, and not just a personal thing, but a communal thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think there are parts of I think that there are parts of this movie that touch on these ideals and aspects of that. And that's why I genuinely think that a lot of people that have a problem with this never gave the benefit of the doubt to the film itself to tell its own story.
And that's why I think that this film has not gotten a critical reevaluation, is because the controversy will always stick with it. I think that's the reason why we don't call this a classic. It's because the controversy still lingers in there.
That's possible. I mean, I genuinely, I have some odd, some I wouldn't call them odd, but I wouldn't know if they are legitimate. We'd have to have a conversation about it. Gripes with this movie and its it's more technical aspects and also like the things that it questions and brings up into the table about a conversation. I should add a disclaimer at the beginning of this. For the most part, I've always enjoyed this movie because of William Dafoe's performance, and secondly, like Harvey Keitel's whatever he was doing, I think was just amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
But like, my disclaimer is specifically that like I don't understand like the canonical history Christian. I understand some tidbits, some stuff I studied in school, some stuff I was interested in, some stuff I picked up from an Assassin's Creed game here and there, and I fact checked later on to understand. Every time I watch this movie, I like research almost all of the major scenes in it. Like I look them up so I know what they are in canon or whatever. Like I always forget how to differentiate the apostles. So I have to like look them up. I've always been fascinated with Judas of Iscariot. Like Judas is such a fascinating figure. His history is fascinating. The debate and the argument around what he is and what he did to Jesus is super fascinating to me. But there are some parts about this movie that I feel like are either strongly ham-fisted, too on the nose, like a little bit of context or panache. Like there is. I'm not saying that there is a better movie here. I don't think this movie works unless it is messy. It is a religious movie after all, and we've seen what tidy, clear, like concentrated, like well-produced religious movies look like, and they're boring.
They're boring, and I like that this film. To an extent, there's not much of a color palette to it. I like that it's just, in a sense, it follows this sort of kind of documentary-ish style too, and I like that the film is messy. It's not this incredibly like incredibly shot masterpiece of a film. I like that it is just. I like that it's messy.
Yeah, I feel like there are some aspects of how it was put together and stuff like that that gives it a real urgency. But yeah, I have quite a few criticisms of this movie, more so than like Tangerine. Yeah, I would say I think Tangerine was like a whole like I love this movie. I think everything it's doing is perfect within its context. Well, this one I'm a little like I love like the pieces of it. And some places there are some parts of this movie where I was like, man, I didn't realize how much I watched. Like, I don't realize how much time has gone by. Yeah. Because this went by bam, 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 and I was like in it the entire time. And there were aspects of the movie where I was like, okay, I get what we're trying to do here, but why is it like, it felt like Scorsese was stuck in trying to say something, but the only way he could say it is if he adapted a specific scene from the book that maybe he didn't need. There are parts, especially at the end during like the last temptation, the big temptation for Christ at the end of the movie, that I feel like there were scenes that were constructed that were just constructed or made because Martin needed to say something and had to move on very quickly. And so they didn't kind of like fit together and stuff like that. I think at the end of the day, as much as the cast was incredible and to a certain extent, a lot of them got their moments, I was left confused on a lot of the motivations of quite a few characters in this movie. And I do think at the end of the day, for how long this movie is 2 hours and 43 minutes. It is a vehicle for William Dafoe. I mean, Harvey Keitel is like that foil to him. It's kind of like Hamilton with Hamilton and Burr. Very much William Dafoe and Harvey Keitel are these foils to each other. Which by the end, that's one of my criticisms, is I feel like Martin kind of abandoned that to make like Keitel or Judas's character the voice of reason inside of Jesus, and it flipped it. I think if he had a true foil in the movie, it would have worked. But it took for him so long to introduce what's his name? Pontus.
Yeah.
For him to introduce Pontus in the movie, it took so long that Pontus's appearance, one, felt way too short for what it is and not as impactful. Even though David Bowie like brought it, he brought such a Roman theater aesthetic to the whole thing. But it just like those parts, like I feel like the movie just had parts that it felt like, okay, I kind of get why you were trying to do that, but you're Martin fucking Scorsese. Like you could have done them in so many other different ways and stuff like that. And yeah, there are a few parts in this movie where I was left at the end like very confused about like motivations of characters, how characters were left together. Not like the narrative like meat of it was like oh, we just like jumped into like the fucking center of the steak and left all the edges out without any like so I do think I do have some criticisms, but I want to get you take me down this trip. You tell me where we're going and where we're doing, and whenever like a proper criticism I have pops up, I'll mention it and we could talk about it.
Of course, and we will get into that after we are done with this commercial break. So when we come back from commercial break, we will continue our conversation on the thematic elements of The Last Temptation of Christ from Martin Scorsese. But in the meantime, please listen to these wonderful commercials made by some wonderful people on the Nerdcore Podcast Network. And we'll see you after break. Hey, I'm Raul Alejandro Mendoza, and this is
Jabril Newton.
And we are the hosts of High Flyer Radio. And finally, pro wrestling has come back to the Nerdcore Podcast feed in the form of a show hosted by Jabril and I. And we talk about everything and anything in the pro wrestling world on Mondays at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Nothing's off limits. Whatever you guys want to talk about, if it's from AEW to SmackDown to Raw to NXT, nothing's off the table. We can talk about it.
We're going to talk all about it. And if you can get it a day early, you should go to the www.patreon.com/thenerdcore and pledge to the tiers on there so you can get this show and a lot of shows days early before anybody else gets to hear it. But enough talking about it. We'll go ahead and see you there at the Squared Circle. Oh, yeah. Don't tap out. Tune in.
Hey, it's Ashley from the Gamer Core. You may remember me from such episodes as Big Screen Mess, Mo Money Mo Platforms, and Brad Can Read. Tune in weekly as I blab with my co-hosts Raul the Nerdy Chicano and Brad the Random Germ about the latest news in gaming and gush over what we're playing at the moment. Oh yeah, and we got the deals too. Keep up with the latest deals in gaming and what's happening as I mediate Brad and Raul fighting like a married couple. Will Death Stranding ever come out? Will Cyberpunk 2077 live up to the hype? Is a next-gen worth a $500 console price tag? And has there ever been a movie adaptation of a video game that's been done right? It's all on the Gamer Core podcast, everywhere where podcasts are.
Hey everyone, my name is Raul, the Nerdy Chicano, and I am the host of The Impaired Files. The Impaired Files is an interview show brought to you every Thursday on the Nerdcore podcast feed. And I interview people such as filmmakers, content creators on YouTube, and podcasters like Colton Geschwander. And if you want to listen to that early, a whole week early, all you got to do is go to the Patreon and pledge to the $1 tier. And if you want to listen to it with the general public, then go to the Nerdcore podcast feed on anchor.fm/thenerdcore. And the case is closed, but it's not classified. See you guys there.
Hey guys, this is Brad, aka Young Yoda. Raul said I had to make an ad, so that's what I'm doing. It's supposed to be for Unstructured, but as you guys know, you can freaking catch me everywhere when it comes to this podcast feed. You can find me on the Nerd Cores, on Gamer Cores, on Nerdy Chicanos sometimes when I get lost. But for this particular one, I want you guys to go check out Unstructured. The Raul gave me free reign to do whatever I want to do. I don't know what he was thinking. So go hear me talk about LeBron James and Taco Tuesday, vaping, so many other freaking weird topics that chimichangas, that's a good one. Shout out to Deadpool. And yeah, I guess this is the end of the ad. So if you guys want to find me, you can find me all over the place on this podcast feed. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. I love you all. And nerd up.
Hello, 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 guys and gals, and you're listening to The Ladies of Nerdcore. I am your host, Daniela Nunez, and along with my amazing co-host, Ashley Garcia, we discuss many things like social impact, pop culture, political realms, and any controversy surrounding the Nerdverse. Tune in and listen to us bi-weekly on the Nerdcore podcast feed, and we will love to chat and hear your thoughts on our wonderful show. And thank you again for listening to The Ladies of Nerdcore.
What's up, everybody? It is me, Raul, and I'm one of the hosts of the Nerdy Chicano Show. The Nerdy Chicano Show is a comedic show brought to you by Luis and myself, and it comes to you all every Sunday on the Nerdcore podcast feed. You can catch it a day early by becoming a Patreon and supporting us at the $1 tier. And I don't really know how to explain this show other than it's fun. We get to talk about whatever we want, and it helps you move on in the week. So if you want to catch the Nerdy Chicano Show every Sunday at 8 a.m. All you got to do is go to anchor.fm/thenerdcore, and we'll see you there, baby. Hey everyone, I'm Raul.
And I'm Brad.
And we're the hosts of the Nerdcore Podcast, the podcast that talks that nerd. Not on this ad, right? And we come to you every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday. On the Mondays, we talk the news. That's the box office, the news of the week, and your trailer talk, if there is any. And on Tuesday, we have our theme review. And on Saturday, you have a Saturday morning review, usually movies that have come out in the week or anything we want to talk about. Right, Brett?
Exactly. Whatever we want to talk about, this is our show. If you don't like it, then you don't have to listen.
We're the flagship show, the Nerdcore Podcast feed, and we can be found everywhere you can listen to podcasts like Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. So if you want to talk that nerd stuff with us every Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, make sure you tune in. And Brad?
Young Yoda out.
All right. Thank you guys for coming back. And we're back from break. And I want to thank you guys for listening to those wonderful commercials. Of course, you can catch those shows on the Nerdcore podcast feed at anchor.fm/thenerdcore. Reminder, my friends, the Cinema Condition is on that feed. But if you're listening to this on the main feed, we're finished with the season. But if you finished on the Cinema Condition feed, we're done with the season. But if you're listening to this on the main feed, on the Nerdcore podcast feed, you are a couple of episodes, delayed. So you can catch reruns on there, but this is where you want to be listening to this show, because this is where you're gonna get season 2 when it premieres and all that wonderful stuff. But if you're not listening on here, then go ahead and check out the Nerdcore podcast feed, as I said, and make sure you leave a rate and review on your podcast app of choice for them. Please, it really does help us. It helps people find the show, but it also helps us be able to, practically one day be able to send the feed to Rotten Tomatoes and be able to get, critic status and stuff like that. So it's stuff that I would hope that we can get to. So we need your help in being able to go and get ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, because those are the only 2 apps that allow for rating reviews. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and get back into our conversation on The Last Temptation of Christ. All right, AK, we are back.
Yes.
We're going to do this. And I want to just go into right smack into it, man. I want to get into Dafoe's performance and the portrayal of Jesus in the film. So
Let's get it.
So, first of all, when I first saw this film, I said, Dafoe as Jesus? I said, okay. I mean, I was like, all right, I'm open to it, but I never thought that it would be, I would love this performance this much, because, Dafoe, at that time, Dafoe, I only had seen him in of course, the Spider-Man films, everybody remembers Dafoe for that one, right? But, I had seen him in Antichrist and what's the other ones? I'm blanking at the top of my head right now, but the one that comes to my mind is Antichrist, and I was like, oh man, what can Dafoe really portray Jesus? And going into it, I was like, oh, we'll see. But I want to say when I got out of it,
He was always the bad guy in that period when we were growing up. Even in Triple X and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, he was there's always at Once Upon a Time in Mexico, there's always the jerk you wanted to die.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, you have to go back to a lot of the weird, more artsy movies he was doing in the 80s, like Platoon, Roadhouse 66, The Hunger, Mississippi Burning. like stuff like that. Born on the 4th of July, where he's like more of his dramatic self that we've been seeing in the last few years as well. Like, yeah, there was definitely that middle period where you're like, okay, William Dafoe is like usually the best. Like, if I was casting a Jesus movie and I had to add William Dafoe somewhere, he would be Judas or the emperor. He would not the emperor, the governor of Judea, the Pontus, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's where I would put him at that period of time. But yeah, I agree. Like it is a weird casting.
Yeah, and I go into it, and first of all, I'm like, okay, in that first scene with when he's he's talking, and then of course you go into him making the crosses, and you're like, oh crap. I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, like, I see where this is. Well, I don't see where this is going, but I'm like, okay, I'm open to. Let's see how he can do it. And as you progress, and you're like, okay, he's not really preaching as Jesus. He's kind of preaching like, what's it called? You're just a guy you see at the bodega in New York, and you're just talking with him, and you're like, okay, yeah. I don't mind that, but I mean, all right. And then he keeps going, and he keeps going, and you get moments like my favorite scene is after the Last Supper, and he is outside. In this moment never fails to get me emotionally. He's outside. He is crying and pleading to God. Don't make me do this. Don't have me be the one to die. Don't make me give my life for you. Like, I'm not the one who can do this. And he's crying and he's pleading. And then one of his apostles come and he has to just stop. And he's like, I have to kind of go back to what they need me to be, because he can't show that to them. And it's moments like that where I'm like, God, Dafoe is just killing. And then of course the final monologue, where he's outside and he's pleading like, I want to be your son. I want to be the Messiah. And I want to die on the cross. And it's this performance.
Very much like the spotlight is on you. This is the moment where you give it. And definitely, for me, like I guess I'll go backwards a little bit with the movie. But yeah, that final moment of the movie, like his decision to not have the monologue be long. Like, Martin is not above having long monologues for his characters.
Yep.
There are so many little, like, Martin Scorsese, like, trademark things that he did in this movie. But, like, that final thing where he decided to, like, have it be so minimalist, so short, and so, like, he is begging. Not pleading, not, like, worshipful, not anything. He is begging his father to accept him or whatever. And yeah, that to keep it that short and to have those little breath pauses where you're just staring at Defoe's face and you just can't help but like marvel at how his face fucking works in that scene. Like, Defoe has like this a face that has been made to be on camera because it is so emotive. And so yeah, that final scene really, and it harkens back to like the first 15 minutes of the movie. I mean, his entire fear of crucifixion is because he wanted to expel God from his brain. And he spends, spoilers are okay, right? We just talked about the last moments of the movie. Yeah.
Oh yes, of course. If you're this far into it, my friends, what's it called? We've discussed, this is 30 episodes already, and this is the final season. Yeah. We talk spoilers here.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
So like, there's that in the first 15 minutes where he's literally building the crucifix to kill Jews so he could amount so much sin that God would leave him alone because he wouldn't think he's worthy. And that scene where he bashes the nail into where the centurion bashes the nail into the foot and it bleeds into his face. Yeah. And then it goes back to like, well, this is you repenting for your sins. It stops being like, until the movie like tells you so. You forget that the movie is about him repenting for humanity's sins. For me, most of the movie felt like William Dafoe's Jesus is repenting for his own sins, right? For every bad thought he's had, for everything he's done, and all the things he had done before then to punish himself for those sins, none of them worked. All that worked was like that ultimate sacrifice he was going to do in the end that he kind of ran away from.
Yeah.
And throughout that movie, you see not just the uncertainty, but the creeping fear it builds up. I mean, he tells you in the desert, yeah, I'm scared of everything, but there's no fear in his voice. You're like, oh, okay, you see yourself as a coward, but you went out into the desert, you built that circle, you fought Satan in the desert. Like, where is that fear? And as the movie progresses, you realize that like William Dafoe's character's fear and the fear that's building on his face and his emotions is not a fear from scary things, like a spider or a cobra snake.
Yeah.
It's a fear of him having to do something about it.
And I think one of the moments that it's present. It's even in the beginning of the film when he goes to meet when he goes to visit, of course, Mary Magdalene, and she, well, of course, she's a prostitute. She's having sex with all these multiple men, and he's just staring. He's staring at this act, but his face kind of reads off as like, I don't want to look at this because I know that there's something bad behind it, and I don't want to confront that. But I cannot look away. And in a way, I'm luring into temptation, but at the same time, there's something that I have to kind of, analyze behind this, and that's why I can't stop staring.
There's this shot. Michael Ballhaus is the cinematographer on the movie, and there's this moment during that particular scene where he follows this man who he calls him a messenger from God that's going to take him to the right place, and he follows this guy and sits behind him, and the guy's eyes are wide open watching the scene of Mary with the other man on top of her, and his eyes are open, and the camera just zooms in onto his eye, and then it quickly, in a shift, turns to Defoe's face, and he immediately closes his eyes in shame. And you immediately get that metaphor. Like, it is immediately in your face. They're like, oh, shit. Okay, he's ashamed of all of those things. And he does have, like, some sort of relationship with Mary. I will say, here comes one of my criticisms of Martin's or Scorsese's interpretation of the Middle East. I do enjoy the fact that he used all the multicolored people that exist in the Middle East, that he used authentic, at the end of the day, though, he can't get away from the fact that he used an exceptionally white actor to represent what amounts to an Arabian character. That's what it was in the 80s. You weren't going to cast, he wasn't going to cast Omar Sharif or any of those Arab American actors as like Jesus at the time. That wasn't a thing that anyone was thinking at the time, right? But the setup of the scene is very important metaphorically to the plot of the movie, but it's also designed inherently like Orientalist in nature. All these Arabian people with their weird, different culture. Like, these aren't like European Jews or Ashkenazi Jews. These are like the Middle East Jews, right? These aren't the original Hebrews per se, and these are not like the more modern incantation of like Polish Jewish people. Those are the Jewish people that kind of built Israel, right? And there's this the visual imagery that gets used is it's very traditionally Orientalist. This othering of these other people that like look at them. There are little smidgens of how hedonist this culture is. As much as they believe in God, the law of Moses, the law of Yahweh, a lot of that stuff. But there is hedonism that Jesus is coming to save them from. And I always have a problem with that representation of the Middle East of like this hypersexualization, this extremely like foreign culture where these men come in glittered in gold, glittered in everything that they own. It's important metaphorically to the narrative, right? Because these are the people that he then admonishes for not giving their wealth to the poor, right? Who are starving and are hungry. But visually, that imagery always makes me like wince because it's like, ah, shit. Like, it's outside of the narrative. This is what people think our culture is, right?
Yeah, and that's just the loss of authenticity there when you do have an American what's it called, a director bringing this, but it's called that was something I always kind of spotted. And I was like, oh, come on, man. I'm kind of tired of how this, like, you know, I always, look, this is my favorite film from Scorsese. I think this is a masterpiece in itself. But I think one of the most important things when discussing art is also discussing the faults of art. And it's, you know, that's one of them that I always kind of bring up. I'm like, come on, man. Like, this is not.
Also, I think it's a beautiful thing for this to be your favorite Scorsese movie.
Yeah.
Because some of my favorite movies of all time are like these imperfect movies that have mistakes, because there are imperfect movies that are bad, but imperfect movies that are considered some of my favorites are usually a director or an artist or someone in the film is trying to convey and telling a story. Maybe they're not telling it in the best possible way they could tell it, but they're trying to. And a lot of those Orientalist scenes are very important to the narrative of Jesus from the context of the story, right? So he's trying to tell this story as authentically as possible and smattering in as much as possible of an authentic feeling culture. That, listen, William Dafoe is playing a white person, but he is not a white person. Jesus of Nazareth, Mary of Bethany, Mary Magdalene, none of those characters are white people. They don't belong to the Christian European orthodoxy, right? They lived in a world that had political things happening in it. I mean, the Zealots are the best example in this movie of like that political tension. When you live in a time where there's someone who's professing and showing miracles and like is so clearly like, and I think the movie kind of fumbles in like proving why is Jesus not getting punished earlier on for the things he is doing, or why aren't more people thinking he's insane? There are scenes that it happens later, but early on, everyone just accepts him as a Messiah of God before he even does any of the miracles. But that's just a continuity thing that I didn't that keeps confusing me about that movie. But like a lot of these things that happen to Jesus are important in the context of where they happen to, geographically where they happen. And I think that definitely 100% Martin Scorsese understood that, right?
Yeah. And I think it was really smart for him to kind of shoot this all completely in Morocco. And was like, oh, you know, like what's it called? It really does kind of have this very, mystical is not the word to say with it. It feels very genuine to the story he's kind of trying to say by having that type of a terrain to it.
Yeah, it's muddy, it's dirty. Yeah, there are certain parts. There are a lot of aspects of this movie where you're like, yeah, of course. Like if you just put any type of like, even if like there is this true Messiah that shows up now, and you put him in a region, and he's telling everyone in that region that the way you've been conducting your religion is wrong. We have to wipe it away. And this religion doesn't belong just to the Israelites. It belongs to everyone, or whatever group of people you're trying to tell them. There will be pushback. People want to preserve an aspect of their culture that belongs to them.
Yeah.
I think there's like one of the more I think slightly important scenes in the movie is the transformation of Saul to the Apostle Paul. Because Paul is a part of the Zealots. Paul is the person that stops Judas and tells him, I don't see any rebirth of a religion. I don't see any freedom here. All I see is Jews attacking other Jews, right? There's this specific like fundamental I need to preserve my culture, and I need to preserve it because there's an enemy that is an apocalyptic threat to it. And but eventually, like, Paul becomes an apostle of Jesus. He becomes one of the major apostles of Jesus historically. And so it's important to show that, because I think what and I can't get inside of Martin's head, but from what I understand from the movie, my interpretation of what he was putting out there is that none of the people I'm showing you are bad people. They are people that are reacting to the current situation they are in. And that's important to realize in Jesus' story. And I think that's cool. I think that the visual representation could have probably been done a little more. like walking in on John the Baptist's baptism scene.
Mm-hmm.
That was just so like, that felt like a hedonist ritual.
Yeah,
Sort of.
it felt very odd, man. Like I still can't get over that. It's like, God, all these people kind of, like acting like it's a heavy metal concert. I'm like, so
Yeah.
it feels very odd. It feels very odd.
I mean, Peter Gabriel's soundtrack is so weird in this entire movie.
Yeah. I do want to say that is kind of an aspect I want to go into. Even though Peter Gabriel's score is still very, very odd, there's still there's still parts in this film where the score, I'm like, God, I just can't help but love this score. But there's moments.
There are parts where it's so thematically like meshes into what's going on.
Yeah.
Like I think the only way the length of the crucifixion scene was like bearable is because the music was building up to something, and I felt like I was getting to an inflection point.
Yeah.
But like there was a lot of aspects of like the visual imagery that I was like, okay, you could like not tone it down. You could have just presented it a little bit better, a little bit differently, that it wouldn't be so like Orientalist. I think that's where one of the problems of like that movie today is that you watch it and a lot of aspects of it is like, for 88, that movie is so generous to the Middle East. But for now, that movie has certain not narrative aspects. I don't think anything about the narrative is problematic.
Yeah,
but I do think visually,
it's more so the visuals for sure.
Yeah,
and I think 100% things like this is having conversations like this is really important, because I think that I don't think there exists art that is not without faults. That's the whole point of why criticism and art have to be hand in hand, because there is no art that is completely 100% perfect, because then if you make something like that, then it's not art.
Yeah. And I agree 100%, because I think it's hard for me to argue for this movie. Like for me, I didn't. Every time I watch this movie, I walk away with a new appreciation for William Dafoe.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like there are those aspects of this movie that I'm like, it's just, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It leaves a little bit more to be desired. And I do think, and that's one of the aspects where I do think that like Martin's Christianity comes out. When Jesus is admonishing those types of behaviors that he sees in the movie, those are very strongly, I feel, related to how Martin Scorsese sees the world at large, right?
Yeah.
And how he sees like our behaviors and stuff like that. But to go back to William, because that's where we're getting into, like William represents all of those. Like the movie could have existed, like the movie was shot in a very short amount of time. I think they said like about 50 days it took to film the movie. And so like there's this thing where like William Dafoe embodied every eccentricity about the interpretation of this character. That's something that's really genuinely beautiful about William Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is one of those method actors that are different than Daniel Day-Lewis or Jack Nicholson, where it is what Jack or Daniel or any of those people interpreted the character is. Willem, as a method actor, accepts what the characterization is that has been given to him by his director and embodies that in a way. I don't know how to explain it because I'm not a performance person, but I've always been like fascinated by acting and the little intricacies. And I feel like Willem didn't make up this Jesus. This was a Jesus that was explained to him methodically through what I assume are conversations with Martin. And he embodied every aspect of what that character is going to be for Martin.
I 100% agree. I think that throughout this whole film, it really feels like it's a personal rendition of it. It's like if Willem on set, he continued to kind of analyze the character that he is portraying, because the what's it called? Because the performance changes so much throughout. Like there's a big, the Jesus you see in those first 10 minutes of the film, it's very different from the Jesus you see at the last 10 minutes of the film. And
or even in the middle of the movie, there's this very confident, empowered Jesus that we get for a little while. The little coy, like, oh, the water is now wine thing. That when he pulls his heart and is like, we're going to war and I'm baptizing you with fire. There's a confidence and an urgency to that Jesus that like, Willem isn't, because that's something that I actually genuinely like about this movie. This is a very staccato performance. It's a very chopped up performance. Where I feel like if an actor had the opportunity to be Jesus, right? If you're being an iconic character, you would go out there and like become like Jesus, right? But in this, I feel like Willem became Martin's Jesus, which is whatever he needed to be for the scene he is in. I think I learned this about Willem specifically from The Lighthouse. So in The Lighthouse, the story was that like Robert and Willem weren't having like conflict, but they were having a hard time like finding chemistry, which is surprising for what the final movie came out.
Oh yeah,
because Robert is like uber preparationist, like he likes to prepare for everything, while Willem likes to go with whatever the inclinations of the scene are.
Yeah,
and that feels appropriate. Robert is going away for a little while. Robert is one of those actors where he's going to go away for a little while. He's going to make the character fit him, and he's going to fit that character, whatever he needs to do, and he's going to come in with a fully fledged character. While Willem is going to live in a fisherman's hut, and he's going to be by the set all the time, and he's going to be there, and he's going to be having conversations with people and stuff like that. And at the end, he's going to adapt his scene to whatever is needed for him on set to achieve what he needs, which makes the performance not only feels less organic because it's not his real self, but it feels more reactive. It takes you by surprise more times than it doesn't, right? After a while of getting used to someone's character who has it fully figured out, like if we're talking about like Lincoln, Daniel Day-Lewis and Lincoln, right? Halfway about that movie, you kind of know how he's going to react to certain situations, or how he's going to say a certain thing, or how he's going to tell a story, or how he's going to give a monologue, right? Because that is a fully fledged character that Daniel Day-Lewis worked on, built, and brought it to the set. So no matter how the scenery changes, how the set changes, that character is constant for him. While Willem, you watch him throughout this movie, at the beginning, he's like a fucking little boy, and he's getting beat up by Judas and like all that stuff. And then later on in the movie, he shows up and like he is this paternal figure that stands on top of everyone. When he talks to Satan, it's in multiple scenes. It is nothing like when he talks to his dad. When he talks to his dad, he's begging his dad. He wants his dad's attention. He wants his dad to give him something. While with Satan, he is refuting anything. He's putting up this really strong shield. None of those character traits are consistent with each other.
No, they're never consistent, and they always feel as if they're kind of leading up to where it comes at the end, and it feels very. It feels very genuine, like a performance that he's kind of like you're saying, he's working on it on set, and I think that well, my opinion aside on how an actor should do it. It's minuscule. That comes down to actors and how they portray their characters. But, it like you're saying, it always feels like Willem is kind of working through this performance with every single scene he's kind of being instructed to do on set, and it comes to possible, those conversations with Scorsese on set.
Or how, and I do know that like Scorsese is very micromanaging on sets. I've heard stories of like Robert De Niro talking about Raging Bull and Leo talking about like The Wolf of Wall Street and The Departed and stuff like that. Like he's very meticulous about how he wants to present his characters and stuff like that. And that's why I think he likes to work with people like Harvey Keitel and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
They take instruction very well, but like it doesn't mean that like I think I'm worried the audience might think that I'm saying like Willem is an automaton that accepts everything. No, you need to perform that on the fucking spot. Like if Martin says cut and he's like, could you give me more of this? And he has to deliver it. Like that is just as difficult as someone having to remain in character the entire time, or a character actor having to embody an archetype and make it unique. Like you would call Willem Dafoe a method actor, I think. Not
I
a
100% believe he is. I 100% believe he is a method actor.
Yeah, I think Harvey Keitel is more of a character actor. But that's the thing is like you're taking that immediate like point of inflection. You're taking someone else's character. It's why like I do find it like it's why I like I do think that like Willem Dafoe doesn't think of his characters a lot. He comes in and he performs his characters as they are, which is great because when he's given freedom, you get characters like Norman Osborn in Spider-Man, right? Where he's just this bombastic, loud, over-the-top thing, and he's every scene he's in, he's chewing it, he's eating it, and Sam Raimi's like loving it. He zooms in on his face like he wants to scintillate every corner of it, right? And that's why. But like, if you put Willem Dafoe in a scene and you're telling him like, I need this and I kind of need this, and like you're giving him pointers, I don't think anyone would just like tell an actor exactly what to do. Willem will go with that. Like Willem will give you like almost tailor-made like the character you want. He's a phenomenal actor. It's a genuine shame that he is nowhere near any of the. Barbara Hershey got a nomination for a Golden Globe, but he didn't. I think Barbara Hershey did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I talked about this. I 100% believe that Dafoe deserved a nomination, but I think that he should have won for Best Actor.
What was 88? What were the Oscars for 88?
88, I do not remember.
A detour and see the 1988.
Let's go ahead and do
Oscars.
a detour here, right? Let's just Academy Awards, 1988.
It would be the 60th.
I think so. 60th, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No. Okay. Yeah.
Best actor would be Michael Douglas in Wall Street.
Wall Street. Which no, like I love Michael Douglas in Wall Street, but
yeah. That's, but you know, that's, yeah. No, I think that 100% that he is.
Yeah, no, like watching the nominations list, like I would 100% say that what's his name? That Willem Dafoe deserved a nomination in this listing.
The only
as much
one
as I love Robin Williams, I wouldn't have.
The only one who was nominated for at least this film for the Academy Award was Best Director. That Scorsese was nominated.
It was Scorsese, yeah.
Which is pretty
but he
generous.
Lost to The Last Emperor.
Yeah.
Which like The Last Emperor, like if you want to talk about a movie that's more Orientalist, it would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
The Last Emperor from Bernardo Bertolucci. But yeah, and I want to kind of go back because you said that there was another performance in here that really surprised you this second time around. What was it?
I think we had it wrong. I think it was the 61st. Yeah, it was the 61st Academy Award.
Okay. Well, what was 61st?
Dustin Hoffman for Rain Man.
Rain Man. Okay.
Maybe. But like, I would totally kick Tom Hanks's Big to the curb and put in Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that this is a performance that I don't think that
Also, this was back in the era when one movie like owned every year of the Oscars. So that year where The Last Temptation of Christ was nominated, it was all Rain Man. Rain Man Best Movie, Rain Man Best Director, Best Actor, like pretty much almost half the awards went to Rain Man that year.
And I think
which Rain Man is great, but like, does anyone care about Rain Man anymore? Also, isn't it offensive to like autistic people because they lied about what autism is? Anyways, let's not get into Rain Man. That's probably a conversation for another time.
Different conversation for a different movie. But it's just I think that this is a performance that was worthy of that award, and I think this is a performance that I think that it's to me this is one of my favorite performances that Defoe has done. It's one of my performances in general, because I think that this is a performance that it's not more about the preparation, but more as the approach to the character.
It literally embodies the role. Acting is to react.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is reacting, and a lot of times, like, this is the difficulty in a movie from the 80s where a lot of actors aren't prepared to act in a CGI room. Willem Dafoe in a lot of scenes is reacting to non-existent beings.
Mm-hmm.
His biggest conversations with humans are with Harvey Keitel's character. But for the most part, he is talking to God, who doesn't respond. He is talking to prophets who eventually die or get sent to heaven or are sent from heaven, or Satan. Those are the major characters he's talking to. He does talk to quite a few women, but that's another weird thing about this movie is, like, while women feel exorbitantly important for the narrative, and it felt like Martin Scorsese put a lot of weight more on the women in Jesus's life than the men. I mean, Mary of Bethany and Martha and Mary Magdalene and even Jesus's mom get more scenes, more talking lines than the apostles, than the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
But they still feel like they're only there to be dismissed by Jesus. Does that make sense? Like, narratively, it feels like they're just there to be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah, 100%. And to be fair, that seems to be a constant thing in the filmography of Martin Scorsese. A lot of the women in his films seem to just be there to be dismissed. But that's definitely something that I think that is more of a conversation on overall about Scorsese's movies. Because I'm not gonna lie, the Irishman's, what's it called? The women in The Irishman kind of feel like they're just there. They're
just there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is, this feels like he consciously wrote this movie so the women aren't just there.
Yeah.
They're part of the biggest scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
But also, narratively, even if we look narratively, like thematically within the context of the movie, they're his temptation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, The Last Temptation culminates into Jesus marrying Mary of Magdala, being a good son to his mom. Then when Mary dies, he goes and marries both Mary and Martha. All the women that he's been shunning the entire movie are his temptation.
Yeah.
And so, while they're important from like a casting, like a production sense, narratively, they seem like not only are they dismissed, but also they need to be dismissed for Jesus to succeed. Which is like, fucking, like, that is layers of like, what we need to break these fucking Pandora, like, that is layers of like, what the fuck, like, that is weird.
Yeah. And I think it comes from, it's an odd thing to kind of discuss, because you're right. It's like throughout this whole film, they're there to be dismissed. And then during that last temptation, he just goes back to them and he's like, yeah, no, you know what? I do want to marry you too. And it's, but in a sense, I think that's also, us, we're definitely past the conversation on Willem Dafoe's performance. I think that's more so a talk on the, because he was lustful in the beginning. And I think that the whole part of that last temptation is him kind of going into the several sins that he keeps on kind of pushing back that do not want to be confronted by him. And I think that it's a weird choice, right? Weird choice narratively, but it's like, I think it's just him kind of going into that thing of being lustful.
Exactly. I agree 100%. It's like all of his temptations are being represented in the film metaphorically, like allegorically, but it's a weird decision from Martin's perspective to represent all of those temptations as women.
Yeah, and it's an odd choice, and it really is. And the more you bring it up, it's like the more I kind of have to challenge it in a way. But you're completely right, AK. It is an odd choice to kind of have women be the temptation, and I think that there's another one in there. I mean, it also comes with the whole idea of the family, like him wanting to have a family. And I think that one what's it called? I think it is very powerful when he grabs the axe and he wants to go out, and of course Satan is saying, I'm like, no, why it's been done already. Like, you can't bring her back. You can fight whoever you want, but she's dead now. And it's like it's a very incredibly to me it's very powerful. It's in a sense it's like Jesus, like, like, this is what you've chosen. You took that last temptation, and you're seeing the consequences of that. And that's why, even though I wish that the last temptation of the film was a little bit longer, I think that's what builds for me so powerfully to that final pleading.
Yeah. That was, you make a good point, actually, because I thought if it was shorter, maybe we would have gotten a more directed way, and it wouldn't have felt like it was like this protracted thing where like, oh, it took you this long to realize. But I feel like you're right, because The Last Temptation felt choppier than any of the rest of the movie. And I was trying to reconcile, I might get it thematically if like Martin was going like, well, this is like a vision that he's having. So it's not going to be like, it's going to jump time. And I get jumping time. That's absolutely fair. But it felt choppy in ways that it's like, oh shit, we're jumping so many locations and time periods and people and things that are happening and all that stuff. And like, it was a little odd. And I think you're right. If it was longer, if we had chopped up like the crucifixion a little bit and extended that, we would have gotten a little better context on it being a vision. Because I was caught so off guard by the him getting taken off the crucifix. The first time I watched it, it wasn't until he walked up to his wedding, quote unquote, his wedding, that I start to wonder if it was a vision or anything. Yeah. And it kept going back and forth on whether it's real or not. The scene with Paul, like Willem's parts felt inconsequential to Paul's monologue. There were different parts there that I felt you're absolutely right. If that was longer and they were able to flesh it out a little bit more, but yeah, that was. There's a lot of little gems that Willem uses. I do think that like some of like Martin's trademarks kind of feel weird. Like for the first half of the movie, he does the narration thing that he's done for Taxi Driver, for all his mob movies, for Goodfellas. He does the narration thing and I was like, okay, this is interesting because then I get his uncertainty. Then at the halfway point, the narrations vanish. There are no more narrations from Jesus's perspective. And then at that point, you're kind of left in the dark until he gives one of his monologues where he's begging God. Yeah. And it felt thematically weird. It felt a little inconsistent in weird ways. But like, that's a very minor criticism in the larger scope of what the movie is. And I guess in a way to kind of bring up to me the way I kind of analyze that, I mean, because that kind of stops around the part that he finally comes back from the desert and he's like, okay, here it is. Like here's this very angry person who's going to go and destroy the temple and everything. And it's like, in a sense, I think that's that's around the part that he kind of stops being in his head so much. And, once we get to the, his conversations with pleading with God, I think that's where it kind of comes back in a sense. And I think that, but I still do think that this is an odd film to kind of keep those trademark Scorsese parts. Like, there's that part when they're cooking when they're eating the food. And I believe, it's that same shot, trying to be very symmetrical, but it's not symmetrical. Yes. And it's like, yes, exactly. I was like, why? No, like I kind of understand why he wants to do it like this, but I'm like at the same time, like I don't think I would have shot it like that. I think that it just the best scenes in that movie is when Martin Scorsese does a not Martin Scorsese shot, which is that medium long shot.
Or those or those like quick turns, and they would just rapidly zoom into somebody. It's like, it's what kind of to me helps the film at times as well. Yeah, and it's like Martin will do those in his other movies. Sometimes he did it a lot in Taxi Driver, but like
But like in this movie, it felt very antithetical because Martin movies always feel very quick. How long they are. I've yet to see The Irishman. I don't know how fucking slow The Irishman is. But like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, even the meandering shots where like there's an intensity. The camera feels like it's always going to jump or move or do something. There's a lot of scenes in this movie where the camera just sits stationary. Things might change in the background, people might move, but the camera actually sits exceptionally stationary, which is something that I don't see Martin do. Like, maybe over time when he started getting older, he started doing more of, like Wolf of Wall Street had quite a few of those. But there's that scene where he's talking to the people from Nazareth and telling them that they should join him. There's only 2 shots in that scene, which is not a Martin Scorsese thing. There's a medium wide on the disciples and Jesus, and then there's a medium over the top onto the people of Nazareth. And those are the 2 shots that he keeps cutting back and forth from until they pull Jesus away. And when they pull him away, the camera just pans, which is surprising again. So like there are these little things that like, maybe I need to watch more Martin Scorsese movies that aren't famous, right? To get, if that's something that he does regularly. But yeah, it felt like if the movie was stationary, a lot of it would have felt like it flowed better. Yeah. Because it's also a historical epic. Like, I'm not trying to get suspenseful out of, like, Jesus's story, right? Like, I'm not trying to get, like, oh, shit, what's going to happen to him? Like, it might have worked for the crucifixion, but outside of the crucifixion, a lot of that stuff is, like, you're telling a historical drama, it would probably flow better. Yeah. But a lot of the movies shot really well.
Which is what I would really be interested to kind of know what was in the script that Schrader wrote before the rewrites were done, you know, before Scorsese and the other writer kind of got their hands on it. And that's kind of one thing I wanted to bring in here because that's one of the last topics that I wanted to bring up. Schrader's writing is so interesting. You have Paul Schrader's writing is always like very, a lot of the writing, I'm not a biggest fan of First Reformed, but a lot of his writing is always so interestingly, very faith about, how he challenges his faith, but at times like trying to understand his faith.
It's slower. It's like slower. Like First Reformed is actually a great example of like the polar opposite of like some parts of The Last Temptation. First Reformed is stationary. It's a very stationary film. Things are happening in very staccato movement because there's something metaphorical that I think the last Temptation kind of missed. It did in a few scenes. Like The Last Supper is a great scene because it looks nothing like any of the depictions of the Last Supper. Yep. But it's really methodical. There's like there's a ceremony happening here. There's like a ritual that is happening here, and we're seeing every part of it, which is something that is very integral in my mind visually to Christianity. Christianity doesn't come across as a very like, when it comes to its rituals, not a very messy religion, right? It's a very like, we have these steps, we are going to do these steps, which First Reformed does quite well. But you have this scene where like, one of the weirdest scenes in the movie is when Jesus finally decides to do the miracles. The first miracle he does is expel Satan out of the bodies of the people in the mud. And it's like, this is so chaotic and cathartic. It feels out of place in this movie. It feels very, very like chaotic, very in your face, very aggressive. In really weird ways.
And in a weird way, like I appreciate that because it doesn't kind of focus on the spectacle version of it. Because I at least when I was approaching this movie, like I don't need this incredibly like version of him expelling Satan, like making him look like the grandiose figure that he is. Like just like
the movie. The movie has a lot of like very much like dirt and grime around it. Like there's a lot of like we are in the dirt, we are getting beaten up and stuff like that.
Like when he resurrects Lazarus, it's like, wow. First of all, I think that reads off very horror-ish in a way that I don't think that he expected it, that Martin expected it to be.
Yeah, when the hand comes up and
I jumped the first time I watched it. And I jump again the second time I watch it. Like, I don't think Martin in a way expected it to kind of read off as horror-ish, but it was kind of reading off that way. And it's true. It feels very dirt and grimy because any other film, like if it was like this, what if it had Lazarus come out so clean and beautiful, right? But instead, he comes out dirty, bad, like so ugly looking and very like decayed. Like it's
I
not
think
like
that was very thematically appropriate to the time period. It's not supposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think you're right about some of the script writing and the weirdness of the rewrites. Reading here, I apparently Scorsese wanted the movie to be longer. He wanted to tell Jesus' life since he was a kid.
Yeah.
And the movie got so big and inflated, and the budget got so weird. The budget questions got so weird. I think the Schreider version would have been a little more contextual. Actually, thinking about it now, like when you mentioned the Schreider stuff, it's actually true. Like there's a lot of aspects of this movie that feel like vignettes, not a clear biopic, right?
Yeah.
Like not a clear like autobiographical film, but more feel like vignettes of a life. Very compact and back-to-back vignettes. But like there are certain aspects where like we go from him building the crosses for the Romans to him telling his mom he's going to the desert, to him coming back from the desert. That happens in the span of like 40 fucking minutes.
Yeah. And in a way, I think that's a very Schrader thing, man. That's kind of the way that Raging Bull feels at times. It's like they're vignettes. Like it's not a straight up, biopic about this boxer. It's like, it's giving you like all these different versions, and then the story links together towards the end, and it's like you kind of have to make with what you're seeing in a way that's kind of
not really. You're not like, even though they filmed on location, a lot of that film doesn't feel like it was filmed on a location. I'll use The Lighthouse again as an example. The Lighthouse feels like a fully connected area.
Yep.
And in the scenes, like he walked out of the lighthouse and went to this area, even though there are cuts where like you're not seeing Robert Pattinson walk anywhere. He's one place and then he's the next place, but it feels connected. In The Last Temptation of Christ, it feels like you're moving from set to set.
Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
it works exactly like that. Like I agree with you because like it feels like at one point we were in this particular, like The Last Supper again. The Last Supper. They cut from a scene where they're in Jerusalem and they're in a tunnel talking, and then it cuts to The Last Supper, and then it cuts into him being by those ruins. Nothing feels like it's connected by a location, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't see in your mind because you don't know where the location of the house they were eating in was at, so you can't imagine what road they could have taken. That's a lot of things that like I feel like get missed in how people discuss movies. You cannot show a person walk somewhere, but you can explain enough of the scenery that your head can fill in more of that information of, he left and then like probably walked a little while and then made it. That's why like a lot of movies or TV shows will film a road from the way the character came from or stuff like that. But sometimes intentionally, like specifically in German expressionist films, in a lot of like set heavy films, musical stuff like that, which Martin Scorsese does come from, like he likes theater a lot. He likes to film things like their audio visual theater. It does feel, a lot like we're going from one set to the next to present a scene, a cohesive scene together, which makes it the more I think about it,
it makes it feel as a journey. Makes it feel like a journey in a way. Like it gives more mysticism to Jesus. Right? Yeah.
Like you think about like, oh, he appeared here and did that, and then he appeared there. We don't know every step that Jesus took from the moment he left Nazareth to the desert, came back, and then went to Jerusalem, right? We don't know all those steps. So it actually feels more accurate for him to have appeared in a town, did a miracle, and then left.
Yeah.
Right?
And then, of course, he goes on to cure the blind, which, by the way, that's one of the scenes like, oh, my God, what's it called? With Keitel, he's like, he cures the blind man, and he goes, you see.
I don't know how much time we have, but like, can we talk about Harvey Keitel for a minute?
Well, of course. Let's go into it, please.
So I'm genuinely like, one of the things that I've always found interesting about Christianity is Judas of Iscariot. Judas is this character that's always presented in one of two ways, really, from an outsider's perspective. He is either representative of like everything that is like what Jesus wants to save out of humanity, or he is a representation of like, I can't find a better word, but anti-Semitism. Judas is the head figure of the narrative of the Jews betrayed Jesus conversation, right? But there's this other narrative, a more Catholic or even Protestant narrative, that talks about Judas being, this was his mission from the beginning. He was supposed to present this. He was supposed to do this. This was a part of the salvation. He was supposed to do everything that humanity could so that Jesus could sacrifice himself. Judas is integral to what I do think that like Martin went with that direction, but went with it in a different way. Judas was just supposed to be like, from my understanding at least, Judas is just a representation of a specific part of humanity that needed to commit the ultimate crime. Because the idea of Jesus's crucifixion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raul here. The idea of Jesus's crucifixion is he is trying to save humanity, and after all of that, humanity still betrayed him. All of humanity still basically betrayed him and let him die. And even after that, the biggest possible betrayal, the biggest possible sin you could commit, he forgave you.
Yeah.
And so you were washed of your sins. That's correct, right? My interpretation, my very simplistic baby ass explanation.
I would agree with you. I think that you've explained it really well, but we'll see how the what's it called, the reaction to the episode will be.
Yeah. But so it feels like Judas is the crux of not the Jews, not just what Judas did, but what humanity is always capable of doing. Martin did that, but like completely differently. He was like, no, Judas was like a mechanism of God to deliver Jesus to the sacrifice. He is his best friend. He is his most loyal compatriot. He would do anything. And in reality, in Martin and the book's interpretation, I guess, Jesus not only predicted that Judas was going to do this, but that Judas is the only one that could do this, and that Jesus is the one that asked him to do this.
And in a way, it makes for an interesting character within the film. And
exactly.
And it's like, because I have to kind of keep going back to the Passion of the Christ. Because in the Passion of the Christ, Judas just feels like he's there to betray Jesus, and that's it. And here, Keitel, it feels like he's more than just there. He's there to kind of give reason to Jesus sometimes, but also he's there to be reminded that you are the reason I will get to the cross.
Exactly. And I will argue with the Golden Raspberries for nominating Harvey Keitel for Worst Supporting Actor, because fuck you. Because that was the whole point. Judas's character is supposed to show up. Yes, he has a Bronx accent. Yes, he is basically Harvey Keitel in every Harvey Keitel movie. But it works.
And we love it even more because of that.
Exactly. Because it kind of works. Like, if you think about it, like a little bit from outside the box, and we're not saying I'm an outside the box thinker. I'm a very technical person. But like, if you just take a minute and like just play with it a little bit, it's fascinating because it works. He is this surefire, hard ass, like soldier who is going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then throughout this entire story, he breaks. His worldview changes. He becomes loyal to something bigger. This person who so believed in everything that his culture was, now has become so willing to destroy it that he would do anything Jesus tells him to do, even betray Jesus himself, so he could achieve this salvation.
Yeah. And
Like-
then at the end, in that temptation, be able to bring them back out and be like, no, you are the one who has to make this decision. You have to go out there. You need to plead to God. You need to ask him to give to even give you a chance again, because you messed it up. And it's that's why I think that Keitel is amazing in this movie.
Especially his performance, because his performance, just as much as Judas is the polar opposite of what Jesus is, Jesus is this conflicted, well-to-do person who's like falling on his knees, begging for the right answer. Harvey Keitel is Judas is surefire. He's like, you want to do this? Let's do it. Come on, we made it all the way here. Let's do it. Let's finish it. Come on. Okay, if I do this, you're going to do it. Like, he is so surefire. Whatever either Jesus or whatever his old compatriots used to tell him, he, without even breaking a sweat, tells the zealots to go fuck themselves. Like, that is a part of that character. And so the performances are completely different. While Willem Dafoe is reacting to everything that God and Satan and all those people are throwing at him, and even if he is sure or he has a prophecy or something, he is so unsure about it. Harvey Keitel's performance is a fully fleshed character.
Yup.
Whether you don't think that is Judas of Iscariot, for Harvey Keitel, he made his Judas of Iscariot. He sat down and he thought of everything, every little mechanism, every little minutia, everything that makes up that character. When it is questioning, when it is confused, when he asks Jesus, I don't know what you mean, he genuinely comes across as his character.
Yeah.
Not Harvey Keitel, not some person who's reacting. He's like, no, this doesn't make sense for who I am, for my identity. So I don't understand what you're saying. Like, it completely makes sense for that character, right? From the
100%.
context of the movie.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I appreciate this more. I think that that's why I appreciate this more, even though it's faults that we clearly have stated throughout this film. The Orientalism, the use of women just being a tool for being being dismissed. But this is one of the things that Marty gets so right here, that it's like, yeah, I don't need this character who's just gonna be here, betray him and then just be crucified with him, and that's it. Like, no. I need what I felt like Marty presents is like, no, you need this person who is not just learning with him throughout this journey, but is there to make sure that he never strays from the path. And even when he's far away from him, he's there to kind of tell the rest of the apostles, like, no, we will stay here. We will wait for the Messiah to come back.
No argument, no anything. Just we are waiting here.
We are waiting here. We're not going to move. Yeah. And even when one of them was ready to get out, and when he comes back, the first person to go and greet him and kiss his feet is Judas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that to me, that is well, there are I think, due to the script, the filming, like a combination of a lot of things, there are certain aspects of the movie that come across a little too silly. We talked about while Lazarus being decayed is completely more impactful, the scene, the introduction of Lazarus kind of takes me out of it because of the horror aspect of it. There are specific parts that are a tad silly in some of the performances and the stuff that they do. But still, I think they're very authentic and true to their characters and the acting style that they believed in at the time and what they were doing. Whether some aspects of it comes across as silly is, I mean, you talked about it, the fucking, when the blind man gets his sight back and Harvey Keitel parades him.
Look.
That scene is a little silly because of the way that Harvey is trying to be excited. It's really off-putting and a little bit too funny for me.
Yeah.
I love that scene because it is funny. I don't think that was their intention with that scene.
And I don't 100%. I don't think it's the intention, but I can't help but just be like, they're like, the first he hears him and he goes, look, Jesus just fixed this man. I'm like, oh my god.
Exactly.
But I just love it. I love how he's. Of course, like we appreciate those the thematic approach to the character that Keitel is bringing, but at the same time, it's like I just love that Keitel's being Keitel here.
Yeah, exactly. And like my last big criticism of this is when they went to the cleansing of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
None of that made sense at that point in time. You've all seen all of Jesus's miracles. You've heard his message. You've gotten his teachings at this point. This is like a major point before you have the Last Supper. Like you're fully fledged disciples at this point. And they're walking and they're talking like they're in a gang.
Yeah.
And it feels like Marty and the situation that he set up, they couldn't break away from that style of like New York, like camaraderie, where like these are apostles, these are like, and they're talking about like, what am I going to get out of this? What do you think we're going to get out of this? And whatever. Mm-hmm. It had two effects on me. One, it was like, well, this is why Jesus needs to be crucified, because they're following the man and not following God. So the idea is you sacrifice yourself so they understand that the Spirit is in God. The Holy Spirit is about God. But the other part is also like, you never fleshed out any of these characters before. And now all of them just come across as silly and like opportunistic a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's weird. It's like some, at certain parts, it's like, I didn't understand the use of like, it was a Philip. Philip is the one that walks to him while he was crying.
Yeah.
Right? And hands him. Yeah, like I didn't understand why Philip was picked there. Like why was it anyone else? And also why were they sleeping? Like there are certain parts that I'm like, what? And it took me out of it just a tad.
Yeah.
Like Peter is the one that walks in and tells him that that what is happening is like kind of a vision or a temptation or whatever, that God sent them to save him. But like, why do I care about Peter at that point? Like, Peter had two sentences, and one of them is getting shit on by Judas because he's indecisive.
Yeah. And I think that when he's crying, I think it would have been way more impactful if Judas would have been the one to catch him crying.
Yes. Yeah. But I think then in other parts, like there are metaphors that are a little too on the nose, but I like them still. Like I can't help but like them. They were so like, oh my God, I guess only like a Martin Scorsese caliber director could get away with doing this. And it's pretty great.
Yeah.
When Judas walks in with literal blood on his hands.
Yeah. Yep.
That is fucking what?
Yeah.
What?
It's an only Marty, what's it called? Somebody like Marty could possibly get away with that because he's like,
because you're like, oh, okay, I guess he's like doing a callback. It's like whenever a famous director does the Odessa steps.
Mm-hmm.
Like it felt like that. It felt like, oh no, he's just because he gets it. So it's like half ironic, half a callback, half like getting back. It's like when Marty did Hugo, and like all that movie is like cinema cliches, and I'm like, it's one of the best Martin Scorsese movies ever. I love that movie so much. But it's like all Hugo is like movie cliches. Yeah. And so like, but it's like so silly that Judas just walks up with. I get that all of it is a vision. So you're supposed, but some of that vision was so real that I'm like, why make it so real? Why not just make all of it a metaphor? Some aspect of the movie were weird. I feel like if Marty maybe had more time to refilm certain scenes, he would have gotten a better result out of a lot of it. But to me, this movie, I genuinely understand, and like it totally makes sense within the context of like film canon in my head. The everything you like about it, right? Because there are all the things that I like about it, and it would probably make it like you could make the argument that this movie deserves to be a classic or one of the greats that is looked at and stuff like that. Yeah. For me, there's just the whole package when it comes together. I don't know. It falls short in certain aspects. And
that's why I'm so interested in seeing what that original script looked like, you know?
Yeah.
And, but Yeah, man. I think this movie is I think that this movie is not only what's it called necessary to view when you're looking at the filmography of Martin Scorsese, but I think
Facts,
that
yeah, 100%. I
yeah.
think it's a really important part of like you you can't say you're a Martin Scorsese fan
Mhm.
if there are any left. If you haven't really watched this movie, it's like because one, I think up until this point, I don't up until this point in his career, this feels like his most personal movie
Mhm.
as of 1988.
Mhm.
So like it's to me because like you Taxi Driver is about how Marty sees the world as it is.
Mhm.
Raging Bull is about how he sees like him aging, him becoming old, him like losing his luster, like him lamenting the future.
Mhm.
Goodfellas is about everything he loves about film, and Goodfellas came after. Mean Streets is, I guess, everything he loves about film. This feels like Martin is exploring not only his faith, but why he like what keeps him going. What's his motivation, like
It's
spiritually? Like
it's
what makes
him.
Martin spiritually?
It's him kind of, what's it called? Like he's analyzing himself throughout this film as well, and I think that that's why I don't think you
And
can. That's why I
that's such a
agree.
great
That's why I agree that you know if you don't watch this film, I think that you're not what's it called exploring a very integral part of who this filmmaker is.
Yes, I 100% agree that like a lot of like the descriptions of like Jesus, the fear, the doubt, the depression, the reluctance, the lust, a lot of that stuff is like also like a manifestation, a personification of a lot of the things that like the doubt that Martin has spiritually with himself. Like part of who Jesus of Nazareth is in this film's context is also like Martin, like Scorsese himself. Yeah, 100%. I agree with
Yeah.
that point so hard.
And the balls on him to do it when he's of course an Italian American who's what's it called? The Italian culture is very very Catholic, so
Yeah, that's
balls
very
on
true.
this man to kind
That's
of
very
make
true.
you would never think that it's kind of the sense like when Pasolini makes the the Gospel according to Saint Matthew, like you would think an atheist would not make a movie like that, but here we go,
Yeah.
here it is. So is there anything else you want to bring up before we finish this?
I think we covered a lot. I
Me
have
too.
not read the book. I don't know if I would be. I think this movie is enough for me.
Yeah, I am
Um,
interested in reading the book though. I think that
Well,
it's
good, because maybe I'll read it then.
yeah. I'll probably read it and I'll tell you about it because it is
Yeah.
definitely one that I am quite interested to read because of how the movie kind of affects me. And
Yeah.
but I do also what's it called feel in a way like you that I think this was enough for me. I don't think I want to explore more of it because the movie just did it all for me.
Yeah, I feel like this is. I'm so happy that this movie ended up on Criterion. It deserves
Me
to be
too.
preserved. It
Me too.
deserves to be like something that like one. I think from this movie there are two primary things that could be learned outside of the art of filmmaking, which is one, never typecast an artist into one specific thing. They'll always surprise you. And don't be dismissive of said art when it is different than something that you're looking at.
Exactly.
Those two things are very true of Martin Scorsese. A lot of people typecast him as the mobster director.
The mobster director.
And two, whenever he does something different, people are just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're going to get it.
Yeah, well, I
But it's
mean,
like-
the whole thing about the Marvel stuff came up, and like everybody on there was like, "Oh, the mob director's talking." I'm like, dude, he's not just a mob director. Like, how
Yeah,
can,
I mean,
how
I'm
can
not
you
the biggest Martin fan in the world. I do
Yeah.
think his technique is like I have gripes with some of his technique, some of his characterization. We talked about how he treats women and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of that stuff. And I do think that like the Brat Boys, all of them, like him, George, Steven, have really weird inclinations about Orientalism, where they're like, I'm going to show a really authentic Middle Eastern world, Indiana Jones, for instance, or like Middle Eastern inspired races, like in Star Wars and stuff. But I'm also going to visually make them the other. I'm going to make them so different, so mystical, so like, you're like, what is that? That is so different.
Yeah.
That is so weird.
And
but
you
it's
start
not
to
really
think,
that.
in my mind starts, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. My mind
No, no, no,
starts to
go ahead.
just wonder if that's a director, choice, or is that the producer kind of getting in the way?
But I don't know. Like
Yeah.
Steven was so about like how like Indiana Jones 1 and 2 were like I filmed them in Egypt and I got cast members from Egypt and whatever. But like no one can deny that like what Steven made Arabs in Indiana Jones movies look like bumblefuck.
Yeah. Yep.
And so like that's the thing. I think they pushed the needle forward. And because there were no Arab directors back then, I can't blame them. Like there weren't representation of us. So any representation, it's what trans people talk about a lot.
Yeah.
It's like any representation of us will grab onto, but we need more of us so people stop making those mistakes. So we just need more Arab directors.
Yeah, you
But
didn't have
back then-
you didn't have a Nasdar Farhadi back then. You didn't have all these.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
But that's the two things. It's like I think a lot of people want to dismiss this movie as like, one, Martin couldn't possibly know how to make a historical epic, and two, it's weird that he's making a religious movie that's not really religious. One, I do think it is a religious film.
Yes.
And I do think it adds something to historical epics and autobiographies that other movies, it adds a unique twist to it. Like here is something you could look at. Maybe don't repeat the whole thing. Maybe not everything about it is like something that's like whatever, but like it is coherent. It tells a story. It tells it well. The performances are well done. Everyone took care to tell the story that they do. Here's a different way of telling this type of story and doing this type of movie. And so I think it's kind of nice that this movie is now preserved, that Criterion has kept this movie alive. That's a really cool thing.
And with that, my friends, I think we can conclude it. I think that I appreciate you so much, AK.
I appreciate
this
you,
has
Ro.
been
Thank you
this
so
has
much
been
for having me.
this has been
I
one
miss
of
these conversations.
yeah, this has been one of the best. This is my favorite episode. I knew that this was going to be the one to reach 2 hours. This one reached 2 hours, and I'm glad because I think that this is a movie
Feel the
that
time go by, to be honest.
yeah, I know, but my stomach is telling me, dude, stop this. I want to go eat. But I think this is a movie that deserves to have a long form conversation like this because there's just so much to kind of analyze, and I think we've done a great job
And there
at
aren't
doing
many
that.
movies like this, right? Like if you think about it, like big name director,
No.
non like straight to DVD or like Crisis Your Savior style movies, like trying to tell an authentic story about Christian figures. There aren't that many movies like this.
No, just like I say,
we only talked about 3 in this podcast. Like there aren't that many that come up to mind very quickly.
yeah, there's that nobody wants to make at least big name directors. They don't want to make the religious epics anymore, and it's quite a shame because it's always interesting to see the way that they kind of portray it. But it's
In
just
that
like
vein, by the way, I will. Okay, actually, we do recommendations on this podcast.
Of course,
so I
yeah,
actually
yeah,
have
yeah.
one that's very closely related to this.
go ahead and do it before we leave.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you've seen it, but Ridley Scott also did a historical epic that includes Jerusalem, that includes Muslim, but in that one it includes Muslims and it discusses the Crusades. It's called Kingdom of Heaven.
Can we
it
please
stars
do that one
Orlando
next?
Bloom.
Can we please do that one next season?
Okay, we can do that. You
There
can
we
invite
go.
me again. We
The
can do
last
that.
episode, the last slot I needed to fill. It's been done already.
Okay.
We have 46.
all right.
And with that, I confirm we have 46 films that we are discussing next season.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow, that's an impressive amount. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Kingdom of Heaven is a very fascinating movie. It also has some Orientalist bits in it and stuff like that. But like my parents
Mm-hmm.
love it. My parents think it's really one of the more authentic Western representations of like Middle
Mm-hmm.
Eastern culture. I disagree with them on some aspects, but like that's an interesting movie to watch as like a religious epic made by a big name director.
Yep. So with that, my friends, I've enjoyed this season so much. I am so happy that AK was the last person to come on here.
I'm happy to be the last one too. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
This
an honor.
podcast has been something that I've always kind of wanted to, because I've always been a fan of like podcasts like the Cinephiles and stuff like that. I've always been enjoying it. And I always said I have I hate to say it like this, I have the intelligence to discuss a film like this. And I think that me bringing in several guests to not just discuss the film's elements, but also not have to kind of because I think
No, what you're doing is genuinely fucking incredible.
yeah, because
It's
I think
one of the last time I did it, and this one has been one of the best artistic outbursts. Like just talking about something
Yeah.
that I enjoy, like an art that I enjoy, is like it just feels very cathartic. It's like therapy. So
And I
you're
think
giving a
that-
lot of people a lot of therapy.
Thank you, man. And I think that a lot of podcasts, when they approach something like this to kind of talk about the thematic analysis of a film, they rely too much on how much they enjoy the film. And I think that there's a reason. Like I talked about Interview with the Vampire on this podcast, and I don't like that movie, but I was still able to at least get 50 minutes worth of analysis in there. Next season we have Avengers Endgame, a film that I don't like that movie, but
That movie should have been 40 minutes long.
we'll talk about that off air. But a movie that I don't like, but I think that there's still room for some sort of analysis on there, and I think that that's why I enjoy this podcast so much. And I'm not lying, guys. If I didn't have the other shows, if suddenly I lose Brad and I can't do the other shows, this is the only show I would do all year. I really do enjoy this. I enjoy what I do here because, first of all, I get to talk about film and how much I love it, but also the thing about film that like a lot of people don't want to talk about because they don't want to. They fear being seen as pretentious because of their analysis on movies, and they think that
if you enjoy it, talk about it. Talk about it however you. Who knows? It's like maybe someone will break down this episode and be like, "Hey, this is 13 times you sounded like a complete moron here."
Yeah.
It's fine. It's whatever.
fine.
I enjoy this. This is how I felt about this movie. It's not about being smarter than someone else.
Exactly.
This is just how I took it in.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, this is what this podcast reminds you guys is that a lot of people have been like, "Oh, I didn't read it like that." And it's like that's the beauty of what this is. This is why it's called the cinema condition, because cinema is supposed to be a commentary on the human condition, and the human condition is read differently between every different person that we have here.
It's true.
So-
Also, watch the movie Watch the Human Condition series. By, I forgot the Japanese director's name. It's a Japanese film series. It's sad as fuck.
But it's yeah. So with that being said, I want to thank you so much, AK.
Thank you, Ro, for having me.
Do you want to plug anything before we leave?
Right now, I'm just really focusing on like finishing school, but hopefully in the next few weeks I'll start setting something up. So I guess keep an eye out for anything Never Good Enough, or me, AKL Moment, AKALMOUMEN. Check me out wherever I am. There might be stuff popping out. There might be some announcements that happen, or maybe I just get so swamped by school that I can't do anything.
Well, you can always invite me on. I'll always come on with you. Yeah.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yes. I would like to secure some spots for like guests to come along, people that I find interesting to tell their stories and stuff like that. I'm just like getting in the headspace to like make something, right? Like how the structure of it is going to be. Because the way it used to be is like a big group of fucking people just talking to each other. And now I'm just like thinking of something more organized, more constrained, something like that. So once the structure is down, I do have a list of people, and you are on that list of people that I would like to bring along and just hear their stories, hear their passions, hear something that they want, that they care about, and talk about it for as long as they would like to, and then make podcast episodes out of.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I will gladly join you. And with that being said, my friends, we will be back in around, I want to say November. And I think we'll be back in November for season 2 of the Cinema Condition. But for now, I want you guys to take care of yourself. Please stay safe out there during this pandemic, and make sure that you guys watch enough movies. Watch movies and what's it called? And fill your time with wonderful art, because I think that's what truly will get us out of this. Oh, of course, the help of health professionals, but mentally, what will get us out of this is great art and being able to surround ourselves with things that make us feel so cathartic. So
preach.
Yeah. With that being said, my friends, I'll go ahead and see you the next time we talk, and I will go ahead and give you a tease. So you have 2 months to look forward to this. We'll be back for the season premiere of the second season of Cinema Condition, when we discuss Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire with my friend, Alexandria Almea. And with that, I'll bid you guys a farewell.
Bye-bye.